Beloved souls, don't ever confuse silence with surrender. The most dangerous storms don't announce themselves with thunder. They arrive in total stillness. And by the time you hear them, it's already too late. Now close your eyes and imagine this: a lion dressed in lamb's wool, moving silently through the herd, calm, gentle-eyed, unassuming. The others smile, thinking it's just another harmless sheep. But beneath that soft coat, claws sharpened by pain, teeth carved from years of experience, eyes that have watched betrayal wear 1,000 friendly faces. And now, chosen one, that lion is finished, pretending. Here's the harsh reality: you've been underestimated. Not because you were weak, but because you played your role so convincingly that even the sharpest minds mistook you. They saw your kindness and thought it was naivety. Your patience looked like fear to them. Your quiet presence, they assumed it was emptiness. But all along, your sweet side wasn't your true self. It was the perfect mask, a camouflage crafted so they would expose themselves while you read them like an open book with torn pages. I want to pause and say thank you. Thank you for being here, for listening, for carrying this message in your spirit. If this resonates, please press like and subscribe right now so this message reaches more hidden warriors across the world. And to every soul who has supported this mission through super thanks, I see you, I honor you, and I thank you from the depths of my heart. Whether you choose to give or not, your energy here is everything, and I am beyond grateful for you. You weren't just another name passing through. You were chosen for this message, for this awakening, for this chapter. You are part of a sacred collective force rewriting the battlefield of this world. They thought they knew you, the quiet one in the room, the one who smiled instead of snapped, who forgave instead of fought back. They called you harmless, all softness, no bite. And for a while, you let them believe it, didn't you? Not because you were scared, but because you were always smarter than the room. When you're the chosen one, you don't show your cards. You study theirs. You let the snakes expose themselves. You let the clowns play their act. You stood silent, not because you surrendered, but because you knew silence was your loaded gun. That sweet side, it wasn't surrender, it was bait. And now, the trap is snapping shut. Someone is realizing that the version of you they thought they could manipulate never really existed. That sweet mask was a performance, a necessary illusion to keep you safe while you studied every move, every smirk, every lie. Now the real you is stepping forward, the one built from scars, molded in solitude, strengthened by betrayal. That version doesn't seek permission to rise anymore. You're not becoming cold, you're becoming clear. You're not switching up, you're waking up. The universe gave you a gift, awareness. And with that gift came a truth so sharp it could cut through centuries of deception. Not everyone deserves access to your softness, because some people only love you close enough to strike. And when they realize your sweetness was a shield, not your soul, they panic, they scramble, they slip, because finally they understand you were never harmless. You were hidden, and now that the soft mask has dropped, they see the storm you've always carried inside. So if this message is lighting a fire in your chest right now, that's not an accident. Drop a 777 in the comments if you've ever been underestimated because of your kindness. If you're ready to turn that silence into strategy and that sweet mask into a memory, and if this message hits you deep, bless this mission with a super thanks. Every offering, no matter how big or small, fuels the light we're spreading to awaken more chosen souls like you. And please know, whether you donate or simply stay present here. I honor you beyond words. Now, let's dive into this story step by step. God's chosen ones. Your sweet side hid a deeper power, and they're shocked. Number 1. They took your smile for stupidity. Now watch them suffocate on their own misjudgment. Chosen one. Do you realize how many people underestimated you simply because you carried softness in your spirit? They looked at the way you forgave easily, how you stayed quiet during their storms, and assumed you were naive or weak. But have you ever seen a volcano warning before it erupts? Did they really think your gentle laughter meant you had no claws? They saw sugar when you were salt, both a healer and a purifier, a comfort and a sting. And now, that same salt is burning their open wounds. Wounds they inflicted on themselves when they underestimated the depths of your power. How many times did you hear them whisper that you were too nice, or that you didn't have the backbone to stand up? And yet, weren't you watching the entire time, recording every slight, every lie, every manipulation? You didn't smile because you were surrendering. You smiled because you were studying, gathering evidence with the precision of a surgeon holding a scalpel in silence. Remember Joseph in the Bible? His brothers threw him into a pit, convinced he was just a foolish dreamer. Yet Genesis 50:20 reminds us, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Just like Joseph, you wore sweetness as a disguise, while God shaped you in secret. You were not simply forgiving, you were patient enough to let their own arrogance become their downfall. Have you ever considered how strategic your kindness really was? Did they ever stop to think that you could have retaliated at any moment, but chose not to? Not out of fear, but out of discipline. That is the power they never saw coming. Think about Nelson Mandela. The world saw a peaceful spirit during his imprisonment, a gentle man. But behind that was an unbreakable force that would later shake entire systems. He wasn't docile, he was deliberate. You, chosen one, carry that same quiet intensity. You knew when to speak and when to remain silent. You knew when to let them think they had control, all while you were pulling the invisible strings of your own destiny. Were you too nice? Or were you simply so wise that you understood some wars are won without a single shout? When you look at your past self, the version that responded to late-night texts, forgave without proper apologies, stayed loyal to people who secretly cheered for your downfall, do you ever ask why you did it? Let me answer for you. It wasn't weakness. It was observation. You were a lion, camouflaged in the grass, waiting for the right moment to rise. Maya Angelou famously said, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." And yet, you let them keep showing you, again and again, allowing them to pile up evidence against themselves. That is not softness, that is divine intelligence. Consider Princess Diana. The world adored her kindness, but beneath her sweet exterior was a woman strong enough to stand against an entire institution. When she finally decided to reveal her truth, the ripple shook the monarchy to its core. You, too, have a spirit that terrifies those who can only thrive in darkness. Your sweetness was not a weakness. It was the cloak you wore until your spirit was ready to step into the light fully. Doesn't it make you wonder why your silence scared them more than your words ever did? The Bible in Matthew 10:16 says, "Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore be wise as serpents and harmless as doves." You embodied this perfectly, externally gentle, internally sharp, like Elon Musk, who was dismissed for dreaming too big. ridiculed for believing in electric cars and reusable rockets. You were mocked in your season of quiet building. But now, as the world sits in Tesla vehicles and watches SpaceX rockets soar, they remember every insult they hurled and realize they missed the genius hidden in plain sight. Psychologists call this the halo effect. They assumed your warmth meant weakness, that your kindness equaled cluelessness. But kindness in your hands was a weapon, a soft blade that waited for the perfect moment. They mistook your smile for surrender, not realizing it was the final sunrise before the storm. Hebrews 4:12 tells us, "For the word of God is living and active, sharper than any double-edged sword. Your silence now slices deeper than any argument ever could, and your distance is more painful than any shouted goodbye." Do you feel guilty now? Do you question whether you should have stayed gentle to keep the peace? Hear me clearly. Your gentleness was never about pleasing them. It was a divine strategy to observe, to confirm, and ultimately to free yourself. The kindness you offered was a gift they mishandled. You were not the background. You were the entire foundation they leaned on. And when you withdrew, their whole structure crumbled. Isn't it astonishing how quickly they unravel without your presence? Think of David facing Goliath. He stood with a simple sling, laughed at by soldiers who mistook his confidence for stupidity. But 1 Samuel 17:45 declares, "You come to me with a sword and a spear, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts." They underestimated David, just as they underestimated you. But your battles were never physical. They were spiritual, mental, and strategic. Now they scramble, rewriting stories, gaslighting, trying to frame you as the villain in the narrative they designed. But the truth stands clear. They lost access to your softness the moment they failed to honor it. You didn't lose them. You liberated yourself. And now, as you step into your next season, you carry no guilt, nor shame, only clarity. The world calls it a villain arc. Heaven calls it an origin story. Chosen one. This is your transformation. You are not stepping into darkness, but into divine discernment. Your former sweetness was an invitation to understand your depths. Your new resolve is a declaration that you no longer offer access for free. You are no longer trying to be understood by those who are committed to misunderstanding you. You are not feeding the hungry ghosts of validation seekers who only drained your spirit. You were the blessing they prayed for, but they treated you like decoration. Ephesians 6:11 reminds Zeus, "Put on the full armor of God, so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes." You didn't just put on armor, you became the armor. You didn't just survive the betrayal, you turned it into a platform for revelation. And as they watch the true version of you rise, they finally see the storm they laughed at until it hit. So walk forward with your head high, your spirit sealed, and your eyes locked on destiny. You were never the sweet one. You were the calm before the quake. And now, you are the quake itself. Let them call you changed. Let them whisper about your transformation, because deep down, they know they lost the only thing that ever truly blessed them, you, and chosen one. That's the kind of silent power they will never recover from. Number 2, they thought you were soft, but you were just camouflaged in kindness. Chosen one. Have you ever asked yourself why you wore that gentle smile for so long? Did you ever wonder why your spirit felt forced into sweetness even when your soul ached to roar? People assumed your kindness was a reflection of weakness, that you were protecting them from your supposed fragility. But the truth is far deeper and far sharper. You weren't shielding them from your weakness. You were shielding yourself from their hidden intentions. What would happen if they saw the full force of who you really are? Would they tremble? Would they run? You didn't choose kindness because the world deserved it. You chose it because the world gave you no other choice but to adapt for survival. Life didn't greet you with soft hands. It handed you storms, betrayals, and puzzles so complex that most would have crumbled. You didn't become sweet because you were born soft. You became sweet because you had to survive among wolves who could not process your full light. That kindness wasn't a mirror of your innocence. It was your carefully crafted armor, polished and beautifully deceptive. Every time you smiled while they stabbed you with lies, every time you nodded while they plotted, you were silently building fortresses within. Can you see now that your kindness was never about them? It was about keeping your spirit breathing when the world tried to smother it. Let's imagine you're a lion in a den of wolves. Instead of roaring, you purr. Why? Because wolves panic when they sense a presence they can't dominate. You knew from an early age that your power was too vast to be contained, too divine to be manipulated. Just like David before Goliath in 1 Samuel 17:45, you come to me with a sword and a spear, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts. You came into these rooms cloaked in quiet strength, carrying a name and a purpose too holy for shallow minds. So you softened, not because you lacked fire, but because you knew fire terrifies those living in shadows. You didn't hide because you were weak. You hid because you were wise. Have you ever questioned if all that kindness was fake? Did you wonder if you were living a lie? You weren't faking. You were surviving. You weren't playing a role to entertain them. You were protecting sacred parts of yourself they would have only weaponized. You learned to read rooms like generals, read battlefields, tracking every smirk, every fake compliment, every sideways glance. You observed the way they flinched when confronted, the way they deflected when caught in lies. You weren't passive. You were calculating, mapping out every exit, every potential betrayal. Isn't it incredible how they mistook your patience for submission when it was actually your sharpest blade? Think of Nelson Mandela, who endured decades in prison. The world mistook his calm for defeat. Yet behind those bars, he planned a future so powerful it changed an entire nation. You, chosen one, held your power behind those quiet eyes. Your emotional camouflage was not cowardice, it was the brilliance of a soul in spiritual warfare. You didn't explode because you knew your explosion would leave nothing standing. You bent like bamboo, but bamboo bends to survive storms, then grows stronger than steel. What they labeled weakness was actually sacred restraint. And now that the mask has fallen, they're terrified because they're finally seeing the unfiltered force they never thought existed. They thought they were playing chess with a pawn. But you were always the queen moving unseen across the board. They mistook your calm for peace. But that peace was your strategy. While you mapped out every inch of their character, you weren't blending in to belong. You were blending in to stay alive. You weren't eager to be liked. You were cautious to avoid becoming a target. Have you ever wondered how many moments you sacrificed just to keep the peace in rooms that never deserved your presence? Consider Princess Diana. Her sweet demeanor disarmed the public. But behind that softness was a woman powerful enough to challenge an empire. When she revealed her pain, the world finally saw the truth she had carried all along. Like her, your quiet was never about acceptance. It was about observation, gathering truths others were too blind to see. John 16:33 says, "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." You overcame the world by disguising your spirit, protecting it until the appointed time. They didn't know they were sitting next to a storm clothed in spring colors. Now that you've shed the disguise, they're scrambling to remember when the shift began. But you know the truth. It didn't happen overnight. You were always this strong. You just kept it hidden like a blade in velvet. Elon Musk was laughed at for years. His soft speaking style and awkward demeanor were mocked endlessly. People thought he was harmless until he revolutionized entire industries. When you think of him, do you realize you share that same quiet, disruptive power? You carried storms behind your eyes and universes behind your patience. Now they're gasping in the void you left behind. They're replaying every conversation, dissecting every moment, searching for clues they never had the depth to understand. But there was no single turning point, because you didn't transform. You revealed. You have outgrown the need to be digestible. You no longer shrink your spirit so others can feel tall. You no longer hide your wisdom so fools can feel comfortable. You no longer sweeten your words so cowards don't choke. Ephesians 6:13 reminds us. Therefore put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. You didn't just wear armor, you became the weapon and the shield. Your silence today speaks louder than all their collective noise. What they feel now is not your bitterness, it is their loss echoing in the emptiness you left behind. You never faked sweetness to manipulate, you played sweet to scan the terrain, to study their moves, to identify every crack in their mask. And now, as you rise fully formed, they stand face to face with the force they never imagined you could become. What remains is a version of you they cannot gaslight, cannot guilt, cannot shape. A version of you that doesn't seek their approval or crave their applause. A version of you that finally lives without the weight of pretending. Chosen one. Let them wrestle with their regret. Let them spiral into confusion, replaying every laugh, every silent nod, every carefully chosen word. They will search for a moment of transformation, but they'll never find it. Because the truth is, you didn't change. You were simply unveiled. And now that the curtain has fallen, the world will finally see what a chosen one looks like in their full, untamed glory. It isn't sweet. It isn't soft. It isn't here to soothe egos. It is silent, sharp, unstoppable, and divinely ordained. Let them sit with that revelation. Because you, chosen one, are no longer playing small for anyone. Number 3. They mistook your silence for safety, but now they're about to learn it was hiding. Chosen one. Have you ever wondered why people are so terrified of silence? Why they rush to fill every quiet space with noise, chatter, and empty declarations? They assumed your silence meant surrender, that you were too timid to respond, too fragile to confront, too soft to strike. But did they ever pause to consider that you weren't biting your tongue out of fear but out of mercy? You didn't hold back because you were incapable. You held back because you didn't want to reduce the entire field to ashes. Isn't it fascinating how those who talk the loudest are often the weakest, always seeking to prove a power they don't truly have? The most dangerous ones never need to prove anything, they simply exist. And their presence alone shifts atmospheres. Your silence wasn't submission. It was strategy. You weren't quiet because you didn't notice their betrayals, the subtle jabs, the hidden manipulations. You were quiet because you were assessing, measuring the true depth of their deception. Have you ever asked yourself if you let them walk too far, cross too many lines? You weren't too quiet. You were composed, dignified, a living testament to Proverbs 17:28. Even a fool is thought wise if he keeps silent, and discerning if he holds his tongue. You chose to observe how far they'd go when they believed there would be no consequences. And oh, how they failed that test, exposing themselves fully in their arrogance. Think of a volcano. It doesn't erupt every time it trembles. It holds, builds, simmers beneath the surface, while everyone on the ground carries on as if nothing brews beneath their feet. They plant gardens, build homes, laugh, and dance oblivious to the sleeping fire below. You were that volcano, chosen one. You didn't hold back because you couldn't destroy. You held back because you didn't want to live among the ruins you'd create. You gave them chance after chance. Each silence, a quiet invitation to step into accountability, but they mistook it for weakness, for emptiness, for defeat. Think of Nelson Mandela again, confined for decades, silent in his cell, yet his spirit roared across the globe. The silence wasn't powerlessness, it was preparation. When he finally spoke, nations trembled and entire regimes toppled. Do you feel that resonance in your own story? You weren't too passive. You were storing spiritual receipts, building a quiet archive of every slight and every act of disrespect. You saw the smirks, the betrayals, the cowardice, and you kept it all. Not to lash out impulsively, but to ensure your exit would be final, precise, and unreversible. Chosen one. The air has shifted now. Have you felt it? Your silence has transformed. This is no longer the hush of someone holding back tears or hoping to keep peace. This is the silence of someone who has decided to walk away. The quiet before an irreversible shift. The unspoken announcement that says, this chapter is closed. Isaiah 30:15 says, in quietness and in trust shall be your strength. You embodied that strength perfectly, turning silence into a weapon sharper than any sword. Look at Michael Jordan during his legendary silent treatment games, when he stopped trash-talking and simply stared. Opponents said the silence was more frightening than any words he could have uttered. His quiet focus signaled devastation. Like him, your silence was the final warning before your power unfolded in full. They didn't realize your stillness wasn't a lack of ability. It was you calculating the cost, deciding whether they were even worthy of your energy. They thought they could keep pushing, thought they had endless chances to disrespect you, to twist your patience into a playground for their ego. But you knew better. You weren't naive. You were a master tactician, waiting for the precise moment when silence would no longer serve mercy, but would become a loaded trigger. They never understood the critical difference between someone who can't speak and someone who simply chooses not to. Which one were you? Chosen one. The latter always. Think of Jesus before Pilate. In Matthew 27:14, it says, but Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. His silence wasn't weakness, it was divine authority, speaking louder than any defense ever could. You too chose silence, not because you lacked a defense, but because you knew your truth didn't require validation from the unworthy. Now, their anxiety is rising. The way you've gone quiet isn't the same as before. This is a different silence, one that signals finality, not suppression. It isn't the hush of someone avoiding conflict. It's the stillness of a soul preparing for departure, a spirit stepping back to reclaim its divine frequency. You weren't quiet to avoid an argument. You were quiet to give them space to correct themselves. Space they squandered, like Beyoncé, who often disappears from the public eye only to re-emerge stronger, more powerful, and more unstoppable than ever. Her silence between eras is strategic, a reset, a reclamation of energy. You, chosen one, are doing the same. You never lacked the words. You just decided your silence would echo longer and cut deeper than any outburst could. Revelation 3-8 offers comfort in these moments. I have set before you an open door, which no one is able to shut. Your silence is that open door, an invitation to a new realm they can't follow you into. Now, as they squirm in their discomfort, replaying every moment, they realize your quiet wasn't submission, it was sovereignty. Let them panic. Let them invent stories to fill the void your absence has created. Let them wrestle with memories of every moment they pushed too far. Never knowing, each push was logged in the archive of your spirit. You didn't disappear because you were defeated. You withdrew because their access to your light was revoked. Your patience wasn't infinite, it was disciplined. Number 4. They took your sweetness for safety, not realizing it was just a countdown in disguise. Chosen one. Have you ever wondered why your kindness made them so comfortable? Why your gentle laughter, your patient nods, your forgiving spirit made them believe they had you figured out? They thought that your sweet demeanor was permanent, that it was all you had to offer. But did they ever ask themselves if that sweetness was your true core or just a strategic veil? They thought your smile meant surrender, but in truth, it was a timer set to explode when the final truth emerged. You weren't there to be liked, you were there to observe, to measure, to discern. That version of you, the one who played soft, who gave them space, who swallowed every slight, wasn't the real you. It was simply the version they could handle without collapsing. You didn't offer peace because you were incapable of war. You offered a pause, a controlled moment of calm to give them every chance to choose integrity. But instead of using that grace to transform, they used it to plot deeper betrayals. Have you ever questioned if you were too gentle, if holding back was a sign of weakness? The answer is no. You weren't faking. You were disciplined, spiritually mature, operating at a frequency they couldn't even comprehend. You were a tornado in the sky, twisting quietly, studying the ground below, measuring its fragility before ever deciding to touch down. They mistook your swirling grace for harmless clouds, never realizing that every gentle breeze was a prelude to unstoppable force. Think about Rosa Parks. Her refusal to give up her seat wasn't an outburst, it was a quiet, strategic decision that flipped an entire nation on its head. Her stillness wasn't passivity, it was power, concentrated and precise. Like her, your sweetness wasn't weakness, it was tactical patience. You didn't hide your power, you chose not to waste it on the unworthy. You knew that not everyone deserves to see the storm. Some people only get your sunlight because your hurricane would destroy them entirely. Matthew 10:16 tells us, "Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents, and harmless as doves." Your sweetness was your dove form, a strategic move in a world full of wolves. They believed your softness was your whole story. Not realizing it was just the prologue, they assumed the stall was the story, never realizing it was only the setup for your revelation. You weren't building relationships, you were building case files. Every calm exit, every silent forgiveness was another piece of evidence added to the archive of your soul. Remember Steve Jobs. People initially saw his polite pitch as mere enthusiasm, underestimating the revolutionary fire behind it. They didn't realize that his niceness in early meetings was a calculated move to secure trust before dropping disruptive truths, like jobs. You used warmth as an entry point, not a lifestyle. You never intended to stay in their comfort zone forever. You were waiting, watching, and when the time came, you shed that softness like a snake sheds old skin. When you ask yourself, was I being fake? Was I wrong to hold back? Hear this clearly: no. Chosen one, you weren't faking, you were filtering. You were providing exactly what they could survive. Never less, never more. You didn't withhold because you lacked depth. You withheld because they lacked capacity. Your kindness was a privilege, a sacred allowance you extended to them, not because they earned it, but because you chose to gift it. And now, they are forced to reckon with the reality that the version of you they knew was never real. It was a temporary shelter from the storm they prayed would never arrive. Isaiah 30:18 comforts us. Yet the Lord longs to be gracious to you, therefore he will rise up to show you compassion. You reflected this divine patience. But when that patience ended, it wasn't because you transformed into something cruel. It was because you finally decided to stop lying about who you really were. You realized they weren't afraid of your real self. They were terrified of losing the version of you they could mold, manipulate, and feed from like emotional parasites. Look at Serena Williams. Many saw her sportsmanship and smiles as signs of softness. But behind that grace was an unparalleled warrior spirit. When she stopped playing to be liked and started playing to win unapologetically, the world finally saw the depth of her power. You, too, stopped stalling. You stopped sugarcoating your spirit to soothe those who only wanted your light when it was convenient. Romans 12, Us. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You chose transformation over confirmation. You chose to reveal your storm rather than continue selling sunshine to those who never appreciated its warmth. The gentle version they loved was never the full you. It was a carefully curated mask, a delay, a calculated hesitation, and now, with the mask lifted, they faced the truth they never prepared for. You didn't evolve into dangerous, you simply stopped pretending to be safe. Think of Elon Musk, once seen as a harmless tech nerd, until his disruptive visions turned entire industries upside down. People clung to the sweet version of him, only to watch in disbelief as he revealed his unstoppable will. You've done the same. Your sweetness was never your default. It was your decision. A temporary strategy to keep them calm while you mapped their true motives. Now that the countdown has ended and the cloak has been removed, they are left standing in front of the real you, a force so raw, so divine, so untamed that they can't even look you in the eyes without trembling. You didn't evolve into something dangerous. You just stopped giving discounts on your presence. You didn't become ruthless. You reclaimed your sacredness. Chosen one. Let them tremble. Let them mourn the version of you they thought they owned. Because you owe them nothing, not your softness, not your pauses, not your filters. You owe them only the silence of your exit and the echo of your truth. You didn't change to become someone new. You returned to who you have always been, a storm hidden behind a gentle sunrise. And now, as they watch the gentle colors fade into the brilliance of your full power, they finally understand. You were never here to be safe. You were here to be sovereign. Number 5. You used grace like a loaded weapon, silent, precise, and deadly. Chosen one. Have you ever paused to ask yourself why you stayed so calm in the face of disrespect? Why you let certain words slide? Let certain betrayals pass without immediate retaliation? They thought you were weak. That your silence meant they had won. That your grace was proof of defeat. But did they ever stop to consider that maybe, just maybe, your grace was actually a blade they never saw coming? What if your quiet was the deadliest sound in the room? You didn't let things slide because you couldn't react. You let them stack because you knew the higher the pile, the harder the collapse. They mistook your calm for surrender, not realizing that every moment you stayed silent, you were loading the chamber of your spirit. Have you ever noticed that the most skilled snipers don't pull the trigger at the first sign of movement? They wait, breathing slow and steady, studying every angle, every heartbeat, every micro-shift in the environment. That's exactly what you did. You didn't choose grace because they deserved it. You chose grace because it kept you in total control while they danced blindly on a minefield of their own making. Look at Nelson Mandela once more. After 27 years of silence in prison, he emerged and overturned an entire regime without screaming, without violent vengeance. His grace was strategic, a quiet power that the oppressors never understood until it was too late. Can you see that same power in your own story? You didn't respond because you were powerless. You stayed silent because you were watching, studying, documenting every offense like a general plotting a final, flawless victory. Let me ask you, did you ever doubt your timing? Did you sit in your room wondering, did I stay too calm for too long? Should I have spoken up sooner? Hear me clearly. You stayed exactly as long as you needed. Your silence wasn't hesitation. It was a masterclass in patience. You weren't unsure. You were sure beyond measure. You were setting the board, ensuring every piece fell perfectly into place before your decisive move. They thought your silence meant clearance to keep harming you. In truth, it was your quiet announcement of closure. Think of Oprah Winfrey. Early in her career, she faced harsh criticism and silent sabotage from colleagues who underestimated her quiet determination. Instead of clapping back, she let her excellence speak. Today, she stands as a global icon. Her silence, having destroyed countless false narratives without ever raising her voice. Your story carries that same signature. Chosen one, every fake laugh, every passive-aggressive jab, every manipulative stunt, you saw it all. You chose not to react, not because you missed it, but because you were operating on a frequency so much higher than theirs. James Unn, Dean of Advisors. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. You embodied this divine instruction flawlessly. You weren't out of options. You were surrounded by them and picked none because none deserved your energy. They thought your grace was submission. In reality, it was surveillance. You let them build their fragile castles on sand. Knowing the tide was coming, you knew their confidence would collapse under its own weight when they realized they were the architects of their downfall. Let's face another question together. Was it fair to let them believe they had won while you quietly prepared your exit? The answer is simple: absolutely. Grace doesn't shout. It lets people reveal themselves fully. It gives them enough rope to tie their own demise. You didn't cheat them. You allowed them to cheat themselves. Romans 12:19 reminds us, do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. You trusted that ultimate justice didn't need your rage, only your patience. Think of Keanu Reeves. Known for his quiet humility and calm demeanor, he never retaliates against industry gossip or personal attacks. Instead, he lets time and character reveal the truth. Over the years, his silent integrity dismantled countless false stories. You, chosen one, carry that same sacred hush, a hush that dismantles lies louder than any argument could. And now, as things begin to unravel, as they scramble, trying to pinpoint the moment they lost you, they realize there was no grand announcement. No stormy exit. That's the beauty of grace. It doesn't deliver judgment like a loud hammer. It lets reality do the talking. You haven't even raised your voice. You haven't needed to. Because your grace was never about weakness. It was the most dangerous kind of warning. Silent, measured, final. Ephesians 4:31-32 guides. Get rid of all bitterness, rage and anger. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other. Just as in Christ God forgave you. You practice this to perfection, offering forgiveness not to invite them back, but to free yourself. Your forgiveness wasn't an open door, it was your final signature on the closure papers of their access to your energy. Like Malala Yousafzai, who after surviving violence and betrayal, chose silence and forgiveness to amplify her global voice rather than diminish it with revenge. Her grace became a weapon stronger than any bullet, a story that conquered nations without a single scream. Can you see how your quiet withdrawal, your decision not to retaliate, mirrored this same unstoppable force? Chosen one. Let them wrestle with the echoes of your silence. Let them spiral in the emptiness they created. For they believed your grace was a gift they were entitled to, not realizing it was a privilege they squandered. You didn't vanish because you lacked power. You vanished because your spirit no longer needed to prove itself in small rooms. Number 6. You let them write the wrong story so you could rip up the ending. Chosen one. Have you ever watched people get so comfortable in their illusions that they start scripting your entire life for you? They thought your silence meant simplicity, that your quiet demeanor meant you had no depths, no strategy, no flame behind your eyes. They reduced you to a background character in their movie, a sweet, naive prop they could bend and twist. But did they ever stop to ask themselves why you never fought to correct them? Why you let them narrate your story so boldly without resistance? The truth is, you weren't the character in their script. They were just extras in yours. From day one, you saw the setup. You saw the fake smiles, the patronizing compliments, the subtle digs disguised as jokes. You recognized how they looked at you, as if you were harmless, as if you'd never dare to flip the table. But you let them continue because you knew exactly who you were and, more importantly, exactly who they were. Did you ever question if you should have spoken up sooner? If you should have defended yourself and cleared your name? No. Chosen one. You didn't stay silent out of weakness. You stayed silent because you knew silence was your sharpest strategy. Proverbs 26:4. Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you yourself will be just like him. You chose not to waste your divine energy correcting shallow misunderstandings. Why would you interrupt their fantasy when you knew it would implode on its own? The bigger their lie, the harder their crash. While they built castles in the air, you were laying bricks in secret. Think of Bruce Lee. Many underestimated him because of his humble presence and quiet charisma. Yet inside, he was crafting a martial philosophy that would shake the entire world. His silence wasn't emptiness. It was an invisible training ground. Like him, you didn't shrink to please them. You shrank to study them, to observe their habits and catalogue their true nature without alerting them that you were awake the entire time. Imagine yourself at a poker table, your entire strategy locked in your mind. Every possible move rehearsed. Your face calm, blank, deceptively harmless. Around you, the others laugh, slap cards down arrogantly, convinced you're bluffing. They think they're leading. But in reality, you're guiding them step by step toward their own downfall. You weren't bluffing. You were waiting. And with every passive smile, every nod, you were taking mental notes, building a blueprint behind your eyes, sharper than any sword. Do you ever wonder how they missed all the signs, how they failed to notice the blueprint in your silence? They thought they were in control. They saw your sweet nods and thought they were permission slips. They saw your polite smiles and believed it meant agreement. What they never realized was that each interaction was a lesson you were collecting. Each betrayal, another piece of data feeding into your master plan. You didn't need to rage. Revelation was always your most powerful weapon. Matthew 7:6 teaches us, "Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs." You knew better than to share your deepest truths with people committed to misunderstanding you. You let them talk. Let them laugh. Let them believe their own hype. Because you understood that illusions are best destroyed by time, not by argument. Think about Taylor Swift. She let the media paint her as the helpless, heartbroken girl for years. Instead of constantly fighting the narrative, she collected stories, turned them into art, and ultimately took ownership of her story in a way that left critics scrambling. You, chosen one, have done the same. You let them believe they had you figured out, all while writing your true story in secret. Romans 12:21 encourage us. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Your silence wasn't about retreating. It was about setting the ultimate trap, not to destroy them with hate, but to overcome them with the undeniable truth of who you really are. As they assumed they held power over your narrative, they became sloppy. They revealed secrets, showed true colors, lowered their guard completely. They failed to realize the more they underestimated you, the more powerful you became. The more they laughed, the deeper your notes went. The more they dismissed, the stronger your position became. And now, as the illusion crumbles and the final page turns, they find themselves exposed, weak, and terrified by the force standing before them. You think of Steve Jobs again. When ousted from Apple, he didn't rage publicly. He retreated, built Pixar, refined his vision, and then returned stronger than ever, ultimately reshaping the world. His silence wasn't defeat. It was a strategic pause before a revolution, just like you, chosen one. Your silence was never surrender. It was the sound of you reloading. Now they spin in confusion, desperate to figure out when they lost control. But the truth is, they never had control to begin with. You let them build the fantasy. You let them think they were writing the script. Because you knew, when you finally revealed the real you, it would be too late for them to rewrite their roles. They never saw it coming because they were too focused on their own projections, too blind to see the quiet storm forming behind your kindness. Vi ens peter pietsi, desmit assuresus. And after you have suffered a little while, the God of all grace will himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. You allowed the suffering, the misinterpretations, because you trusted that God would handle your restoration. You didn't fight for a seat at their small tables. You were building your own kingdom in silence. Number 7. You used softness like a spotlight. Now their darkness has nowhere to hide. Chosen one. Have you ever asked yourself why your kindness unsettled them so deeply? Why did your gentle presence create so much chaos in rooms that claimed to value love and loyalty? They didn't realize that your softness wasn't about proving you were good. It was an invitation for them to prove who they really were. Did they ever consider that your kindness was a mirror rather than a magnet? You weren't desperately trying to connect. You were intentionally testing their capacity to honor your light. You offered purity not because you needed validation, but because you needed to see who would cherish it and who would spit venom into your sacred spaces. Your gentleness wasn't an olive branch extended in naive hope. It was a velvet trap designed to separate the sincere from the strategic, the genuine from the manipulators. Imagine this: a scientist drops a clear substance into a murky pond, not to purify the water, but to see what hidden creatures rise to the surface. That's exactly what your energy did. You illuminated the room just by existing, not by forcing truth, but by providing contrast so stark that the shadows had no place to retreat. Can you see now that your light was never about comfort? It was about confrontation without a single word. Think of Princess Diana. Her gentle demeanor forced an entire royal institution to reveal its cracks and cruelty. She didn't storm the gates with aggression. Her quiet grace exposed the rot from within. You, chosen one, carried that same frequency. Your presence demanded honesty, and those who thrived in lies found themselves twitching under your gaze. Do you ever wonder, was I too kind? Did I allow too much dishonor into my space? Hear this truth: you allowed exactly enough silence for their intentions to echo, enough rope for them to weave their own traps, enough light for every hidden agenda to crawl into view. You weren't passive. You were patient. You weren't blind. You were documenting every moment with divine precision. Proverbs 4:23 reminds us, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. You guarded your heart even as you opened your hands. Look at Malala Yousafzai. Her soft, peaceful voice challenged a global system of oppression. Her calm presence made the darkness of her enemies so visible that they had no choice but to show themselves fully. Like her, you didn't wage war with rage. You dismantled illusions with unwavering sweetness. Your kindness wasn't an invitation to exploit. It was a line drawn in glowing light, daring them to cross. And when they did, their true nature spilled out for all to see. They thought you wore sweetness to hide your lack of strength. But what if the sweetness was actually your strongest weapon? What if it was never meant to soothe them, but to expose them? You didn't move quietly to protect them. You moved quietly so they could build their own evidence. Every time they lied, every time they played the victim, every time they twisted your words, you watched, smiled, and stored it away. Your kindness wasn't a shield. It was bait, and they swallowed it whole, never realizing it was laced with accountability. Matthew 10:26 says, "So do not be afraid of them, for there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known." You lived this verse daily, allowing your light to do the revealing while your spirit stayed still and observing. You never needed to expose them aggressively. Their own behavior did all the heavy lifting. Consider Mr. Rogers, a man so gentle and kind that critics mocked him as naive. Yet his unwavering kindness exposed the cynicism and cruelty in those who underestimated him. His love wasn't weakness, it was a spotlight, revealing who was truly strong and who merely performed strength. Like him, your softness wasn't compliance. It was a cosmic interrogation lamp, chosen one. Let me ask you, do you feel regret now that the masks have fallen? Do you wish you had set firmer boundaries sooner? You didn't delay your truth. You timed it perfectly. You gave them enough stage time to act out their roles, to get lost in their own script, so that when the final act came, they had no alibi left. Your kindness was never about keeping peace, it was about keeping score. And now, the game is over. 1 John 1:5 declares, God is light. In him there is no darkness at all. Your light, chosen one, carried this same divine frequency. The moment you stepped into a room, every shadow lost its camouflage. You didn't have to raise your voice or wave receipts. Your energy did it for you. And now, the stage lights are fully on. They can no longer shapeshift, no longer manipulate narratives or gaslight your spirit. They're squirming now because they realize you always saw through them. You saw the cracks behind their jokes, the tremor in their false humility, the desperation behind their compliments. You didn't react because you were afraid. You didn't react because you were recording. You gave them all the rope they asked for, and they spun it into a noose with their own hands. And now, as the final curtain falls, what remains is pure, unfiltered truth. No more illusions, no more charming performances, just raw exposure that most will not survive. They're left staring at their own reflections in the harsh light of your unwavering spirit, and they're terrified. You didn't become cold, you became clear. You didn't stop being kind, you stopped cushioning their consequences. Number 8. They thought you were the lamb. Now they're learning you held the blade the whole time. Chosen one. Have you ever noticed how quickly people misinterpret gentleness as weakness? How they see your quiet nature and assume they can cross any line without consequence? They saw your mercy, your soft speech, your patience, and immediately labeled you as prey. Someone easy to control, bend, and break. Did they ever stop to question why you were so calm? Did they ever consider that your silence wasn't submission, but strategy? They thought your grace was a cage, but they didn't realize it was a fortress, guarded by a warrior's spirit hidden in plain sight. You weren't just walking in peace, you were actively guarding it, standing as a sentinel over the sacred ground of your soul. You didn't avoid conflict because you were scared. You avoided it because you knew that if you stepped fully into that realm, there would be no turning back, no rebuilding what would be destroyed in the aftermath. Can you feel the power in that choice? The restraint it takes to hold back a storm you know you can unleash at any moment. Think of Martin Luther King Jr. His peaceful protests were not acts of cowardice. They were calculated, strategic, and powerful beyond measure. His silence in certain moments spoke louder than any scream ever could. Like him, you understood the deep cost of righteous fury and chose patience, not because you lacked fire, but because you valued the purity of your mission. Imagine this, a shepherd standing at the edge of a cliff, still and observant, appearing almost passive. The flock thinks he's simply watching the sunrise. In reality, he has already counted the approaching storm clouds, assessed the terrain, spotted the predators hiding in the brush. When the time comes, he doesn't flail wildly. E delibersa precise. Final strike. that protects everything entrusted to him. That is who you've always been. You weren't calm because you couldn't rage. You were calm because you knew the exact devastation you could unleash, and you refused to release it carelessly. Do you ever question yourself? Was I too patient? Did I wait too long to draw the line? Let me tell you clearly, no. You weren't passive. You were focused. You gave them space. Not because you were afraid of confrontation, but because you wanted to see if they would correct themselves. They didn't. They pushed, mocked, and rattled the cage they thought was holding a lamb, never realizing they were poking at the hand that wields the sword. Psalm 18:34 says, "He trains my hands for battle. My arms can bend a bow of bronze." You were being trained in that quiet space, forged in divine patience and strength. They took your patience for paralysis, never seeing that every moment you waited was a moment you grew stronger, sharper, more unstoppable. Consider Nelson Mandela once more. Released after decades of imprisonment, people expected a broken man. Instead, they met a leader so formidable that his very presence dismantled systems of hate without lifting a weapon. Like Mandela, you used your waiting period not as a prison, but as a preparation ground for your ultimate revelation. They assumed you would keep forgiving endlessly, that your love would override your discernment forever. But forgiveness without boundaries is enabling. You knew that real peace requires firm lines, sacred borders that must never be crossed. And when they crossed them, they didn't meet the lamb. They met the hand behind the lamb, the protector, the warrior, the divine force they never imagined you to be. Isaías 42:13 declares, "The Lord will march out like a champion. Like a warrior, he will stir up his zeal. With a shout, he will raise the battle cry and will triumph over his enemies." Your transformation mirrors this divine blueprint. You didn't switch characters. You simply revealed the full story. Think about Beyoncé. People mistook her silence between album releases as disappearance or weakness. Then she would return, stronger, more empowered, commanding the entire world's attention without apology. You share that same energy. Your calm wasn't absence, it was incubation. You didn't disappear, you were sharpening your sword in the dark. They never saw it coming because they never believed they needed to prepare. They relied on the belief that you'd always stay quiet, always absorb the blows, always forgive without consequence. But chosen one, the moment you chose to draw the sword, the entire dynamic shifted. You didn't transform into a different being. You revealed who you've always been, the guardian of your own peace, the silent architect of your own victory. Matthew 10:34 reminds us, "Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword." Your spirit carried this same paradox. You brought peace, but you also carried a sword. And when the time came, you knew exactly how to wield it. Now they are standing in the aftermath, realizing too late that you were never the prey. You were the quiet storm watching, waiting, letting them exhaust themselves against an illusion. You remembered every smirk, every dismissive comment, every act of betrayal they assumed would vanish in your kindness. You carried it all, not in bitterness, but in preparation for the day they would have to face the consequences. Think of Elon Musk once again, often underestimated and mocked. He let critics build false narratives while he quietly built empires. When he finally unveiled the results of his vision, the same critics stood powerless, silenced by the magnitude of his accomplishments. You did the same. You let them write you off as soft while you constructed your comeback in silence. Number 9. They thought your kindness was the limit. Now they're watching you cross the line with no intention of turning back. Chosen one. Have you ever noticed how people confuse kindness with weakness? How they believe your patience is a promise, your forgiveness a guarantee? They looked at your smile and thought it was a sign of safety, a sign you'd always be there to absorb their chaos, to take the hit and keep on loving. But did they ever pause to ask what that smile really meant? Did they ever stop to wonder if your calm was a gift or a countdown? Your sweetness was not the ceiling of your spirit, it was the soft curtain hiding a storm that only you knew was coming. They mistook your gentle spirit as your final form, assuming you'd never outgrow that role. But kindness was never your cage. It was your last warning. Your smile wasn't there to comfort them forever. It was a final invitation to correct their path before the floodgates opened. Proverbs 29:1 warns us, "Whoever remains stiff-necked after many rebukes will suddenly be destroyed without remedy." You offered them countless chances to change, countless moments to make it right. But they misread your patience as permanence. Imagine a dam standing strong against tons of pressure. It doesn't crack because it's weak. It holds because it's merciful, buying time for repair, giving people one final chance to prepare. You, chosen one, were that dam. You held back an ocean of power, praying they'd see the leaks and mend them before it was too late. But they kept poking, pushing, laughing at the structure, thinking it would never break. And now, as the flood finally begins, they're realizing too late that you were never their cushion. You were their final barrier from a reckoning they invited themselves. Think of Rosa Parks. She sat in silence, her kindness worn like a gentle cloak. Yet her quiet defiance sparked an entire movement. That stillness wasn't submission. It was the calm before a social storm. You share that same quiet thunder. They didn't realize that your sweetness was just a waiting room, not a forever home for their toxic behavior. Have you ever asked yourself, did I act too suddenly? Should I have given them one more chance? No. Chosen one. Every sweet act was a warning. Every overlooked insult was a silent alarm. Every second of your grace was another plea for them to shift. They didn't hear it because they never wanted to listen. They assumed you'd stay small forever, that you'd keep minimizing yourself so they could feel taller. But you didn't change overnight. You simply stopped shrinking. Look at Mahatma Gandhi. His non-violent resistance wasn't a lack of power. It was a strategic move to hold the moral high ground, to force oppressors to reveal their violence. His patience wasn't endless. It was purposeful. And when the time came, that patience turned into unstoppable momentum. You, chosen one, have walked the same path. Your kindness wasn't an endless river, it was a reservoir, and now it's empty for them. John 2:15 says, "So he made a whip out of cords and drove all from the temple courts." Even Jesus, who embodied ultimate love, had a limit, a line that, once crossed, revealed a side of him people never expected. Your own line has now been crossed. Your kindness wasn't meant to last forever. It was a conditional offering, and they failed to honor it. They don't fear your anger now. Anger is predictable. They can argue with it, spin it, manipulate it. What terrifies them is your detachment, the way you can vanish from their life without a single word, without the emotional fireworks they crave. You didn't ghost them out of cruelty. You departed because you finally understood the cost of staying. You realized that staying sweet for people who poison you doesn't make you noble, it makes you spiritually bankrupt. Think of Oprah Winfrey, betrayed and underestimated repeatedly. She never needed to explode. Instead, she pulled back her energy, built empires, and became unreachable to those who once thought they owned her loyalty. Your story mirrors hers. Your absence is louder than any scream, more powerful than any dramatic exit. Ephesians 4:31 tells us, "Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you." You didn't become bitter, you became better. You didn't slam the door, you simply walked out so silently that by the time they realized, you were already gone. And now, when they look into your eyes, they feel a new chill. Your smile no longer warms them, it freezes them. Because they know, it no longer carries hope, it carries finality. They sense the shift, even if they pretend they don't, because they know that the energy in your presence is no longer an open invitation, it's a closed chapter. Have you asked yourself, was I too harsh for cutting them off so completely? The answer is no. You gave them countless opportunities to self-correct, to honor your grace, to meet you at your frequency. They chose arrogance over accountability, and now they face not your rage but your calm indifference, and that is a punishment they cannot manipulate or sweet-talk their way out of. Number 10. They forgot angels don't just sing, they strike. Chosen one. Have you ever felt the tension in a room when you enter? Even before you speak, they saw your halo and assumed it was merely decorative, a soft glow to make them feel safe. But did they ever stop to consider that your halo wasn't just a light, it was a tracking device, a silent scanner reading every hidden motive and dark agenda in the room? They confused your peace with passivity, believed your empathy meant endless tolerance, mistook your forgiveness as proof you would never set a final boundary. But oh, what a catastrophic miscalculation that was. They never paused to ask themselves where your light actually came from. Didn't they realize that no true light exists without first surviving the darkest night? You didn't step into your grace untested. You didn't wake up glowing by accident. You emerged from fires that should have consumed you, carrying scars turned into armor. You were not created to simply be agreeable. You were designed to be accurate, to embody divine precision. Look at Harriet Tubman. People underestimated her because of her gentle appearance and calm demeanor. But behind that softness was a revolutionary force, so strong it shook an empire of oppression to its core. You carry that same hidden might. They expected a docile spirit wrapped in kindness. Instead, they encountered a storm wrapped in silence. Have you ever wondered, am I too harsh for finally drawing the line? Should I have stayed soft just a little longer? The answer is no. You didn't show up to protect fragile egos or soothe illusions. You came to be a living revelation, to expose what hides behind polished words and staged charm. You were never just light. You were also heat. And now that you've stopped dimming it, they feel it scorching through their facades. Matthew 10:16 says, "Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore be wise as serpents and innocent as doves." You mastered this wisdom. Your softness was strategy, your warmth a test, your silence a scalpel cutting deeper than any scream could. And now that the glow has intensified, the entire room is burning with the exposure they never wanted. Imagine this: a quiet figure enters, serene, present, seemingly harmless. People exhale, thinking they're safe. But slowly, the light begins to intensify. Shadows squirm, Lismilt. Masks fall away. They start trembling, not because you changed, but because they finally realize you were seeing them clearly the entire time. Think of Malala Yousafzai. The world saw her as a fragile, soft-spoken girl, but her words carried a fire that ignited global change. Her presence alone forced oppressive regimes to reveal themselves. You, chosen one, operate in that same paradox. You didn't come to comfort dysfunction. You came to annihilate it with presence alone. John 1-5 tells us, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." Your very existence has been a quiet confrontation against every hidden shadow. You offered them time, gave them chances to step into integrity, but they mistook grace for unlimited tolerance. They admired your light when it kept them warm, but now, as it turns to flame, they call it harshness, when in truth, it is justice. Have you asked yourself, was my patience wasted? Did my forgiveness mean nothing? No. Chosen one, every moment of patience was a sacred opportunity for them to align, to take accountability. But you cannot heal those committed to harming themselves. And you didn't come to babysit brokenness. You came to embody divine order. Think of Serena Williams. For years, she endured attacks on her character and her excellence, smiling graciously through it all. But the moment she asserted her power fully, they labeled her angry or too strong. In truth, that was the moment they saw her real self, a warrior they were never prepared to face. Like Serena, you didn't stop being kind, you simply stopped being contained. Romans 12:2 teaches us, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." You didn't conform to the pattern of constant forgiveness and self-erasure. You transformed, and your mind became clear as crystal. Your transformation was never about vengeance. It was about divine alignment. Now, they face something they can't manipulate. Your detachment, your clarity, your divine no. You were silent, patient, endlessly forgiving until the switch flipped. And now, the angel has picked up the sword, not to create chaos, but to cut through it, not to destroy blindly, but to strike precisely, separating what is holy from what is hollow. Think of Nelson Mandela once again. His greatest power wasn't in the volume of his speeches, but in the piercing clarity of his message. You share that same spiritual signature. You didn't come to play nice and keep everyone comfortable. You came to reset the room, to rearrange the frequencies, to restore a divine balance. And you don't ask for permission when the assignment is divine. Chosen one. They never understood that love without power is incomplete. Grace without boundaries is slow, self-destruction. You gave them mercy. You gave them chances. But you never signed a contract to be their eternal cushion. They thought they could keep stepping on your halo. They never saw the blade hidden in your hand. Number 11. They clung to your kindness like a mask. Now they're choking on the truth it used to hide. Chosen one. Have you ever truly considered why they kept coming back to you? Was it your warmth, your love, or was it something much deeper, far more unsettling? They didn't crave your love because they valued your soul. They craved your ability to make them feel like they weren't the villain in their own story. They weren't addicted to your presence because they cherished who you were. They were addicted to your protection, not the kind that shields from external harm, but the kind that hides them from their own dark reflection. Your kindness acted like a fog, a thick mist that blurred the jagged edges of their actions, allowing them to pretend they were still good, still kind, still whole. But did they ever stop to ask themselves why your love felt so comforting to them? You gave them cover without ever uttering a single accusation. Your patience was their sanctuary. Your soft energy, a quiet escape from the reality they refused to face. As long as you stayed, they felt they could maintain the illusion of being a decent person. But when you finally stepped back, they were forced to look in the mirror and see the fractures you had silently absorbed for so long. Think of Princess Diana. Her gentle nature and forgiving spirit allowed many around her to maintain their own illusions of grace and loyalty. When she withdrew, the entire system cracked under its own lies. Like Diana, you didn't abandon them out of hate. You simply stepped away so they could face themselves without your cushion. Have you ever wondered, was I wrong for not calling them out sooner? Should I have been louder about the damage they caused? The truth is, your silence wasn't approval. It was exhaustion. You didn't let things slide because you lacked the strength to confront them. You stayed silent because you knew they were never truly prepared for the weight of the mirror you carried. Imagine someone standing in front of a cracked mirror, smiling confidently, pretending those fractures don't exist. Then, imagine you, chosen one, stepping back quietly, and suddenly, the whole reflection shatters. That's what your departure did. Not through rage or revenge, but through pure absence. You didn't need to curse them. You didn't need to expose them with grand gestures. Your withdrawal was enough. In that silence, every piece of their hidden self came flooding back, suffocating them, not because you attacked, but because you stopped protecting. Psalm 101:7 says, "No one who practices deceit shall dwell in my house. No one who utters lies shall continue before my eyes." You embodied this verse when you finally stepped back. You weren't punishing them. You were simply refusing to host their deception any longer. Think of Meghan Markle. Her presence in the royal sphere highlighted unseen fractures, old patterns, and hidden prejudices. When she chose to leave, the narrative imploded, forcing everyone to confront their own complicity. You, chosen one, performed the same divine act. You didn't shout, you exited, and that quiet departure echoed louder than any accusation ever could. They are suffocating now, but not because you cursed them. They are drowning because you stopped covering for them. Your presence acted as a spiritual airbag, absorbing their violent truths, their emotional immaturity, their manipulative patterns. Without you, they are left alone with the full volume of their own noise. Do you sometimes ask yourself, did I hurt them by stepping away? Could I have saved them if I had stayed? Hear me, you didn't destroy them. You didn't fail them. You simply stopped enabling them. You stopped holding the line that allowed them to masquerade as whole, honest souls while treating you as disposable. You didn't take anything away from them. You merely took yourself out of the equation, and that subtraction revealed every deficit they'd been hiding. Galatians 6:7 reminds us, "Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows." You gave them every opportunity to plant seeds of respect, honesty, and love. They chose instead to sow deceit, disrespect, and arrogance. Now, they're left to reap that harvest alone. Look at Oprah Winfrey. Many in her orbit used her kindness as cover for their own insecurities and failures. But when she stepped back, their real selves emerged for the world to see. Oprah didn't destroy them. She just stopped lending them her light. That's exactly what you did. They called you peaceful, but it wasn't peace they admired. It was your self-control, your ability to make them feel good about their poor behavior. Now that the self-control is gone, they're left exposed, rough, and shivering in their own darkness. You didn't collapse their world with harsh words. You dismantled it with a gentle exit and unwavering silence. 1 Corinthians 15:33 warns, "Do not be deceived. Bad company ruins good morals." You understood this on a soul level when you finally walked away. You weren't responsible for rehabilitating them. Your responsibility was to protect your spirit. Number 12. You didn't just change, you returned to a power the world was never meant to handle. Chosen one. Have you ever wondered why people seem so shocked when you finally step fully into your true form? Why they gasp, retreat, or turn on you the moment you stop shrinking for their comfort? They thought your sweet version was your ultimate truth, the final product. But your sweetness was never the entirety of you. It was a masterful camouflage. A soft armor worn by a warrior who was simply waiting for divine clearance to reveal the full blaze within. They never saw your true transformation because it wasn't a transformation at all. It was a return, a glorious resurrection of a self you had tucked away for survival. That gentle, conflict-avoiding, chaos-swallowing version of you wasn't fake. It was a protective skin, a sacred layer, a shield. You wore it to endure environments unworthy of your fire, to protect the tender seeds of your mission before they were strong enough to sprout in the harsh world. Have you ever asked yourself, was I too soft for too long? Did I enable them by delaying my truth? Let me tell you clearly, no. That softness was not a mistake. It was a strategy crafted in divine intelligence. It held you together when the world sought to unravel you. It allowed you to collect data, discern spirits, and watch who would betray you under the guise of love. Think of Nelson Mandela, who endured decades of imprisonment, his gentleness misunderstood as surrender. But when he emerged, it was not the quiet prisoner who returned, it was the leader who shook nations. Like him, your softness wasn't weakness. It was a cocoon that protected a revolutionary spirit the world was never meant to contain. They thought your kindness was permanent, a convenient backdrop to their endless self-indulgence. But your kindness was not your ceiling, it was your cloak. Now that cloak is retired. You've outgrown the need to shrink to be loved, to delay truth for the comfort of those who thrive in illusion, to sacrifice your voice so others don't have to confront theirs. The real you has resurrected, and this version carries no apologies. No flinching before confrontation. No negotiations with dysfunction. Isaías 60:1 declares, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you." This is the energy you embody now. The same smile they once adored now carries a new message, not warmth, but distance, sovereignty, and sacred fire. Think of Beyoncé. Early in her career, she played soft, carefully crafted roles that the industry dictated, but then came her self-titled album, a bold rebirth. The world didn't see her transformation. They witnessed her return to her original blueprint, a queen fully aware of her throne. You share that same essence. Chosen one. You didn't change into something new. You returned to the design heaven had always written for you. You aren't distant now. You're divine. You're no longer proving anything. You don't need to be understood by those who lack the capacity to see past their own projections. You're done giving free passes to people who used your patience as a hiding place for their cowardice. Those doors you used to leave cracked open, now they're sealed, guarded, not out of bitterness, but from holy evolution. Romans 12:9 comment. Let love be genuine. Abhor what is evil, hold fast to what is good. You embodied that love even when it cost your peace. But now, the love is refined. It is no longer an open buffet for emotional beggars. It's sacred, selective, and aligned with your higher assignment. Do you sometimes question, did I become too cold, too harsh? Hear this. Clarity feels cold to those who have lived too long in illusions. They don't miss your kindness. They miss the control it gave them. They miss the ability to guilt you into staying small, to manipulate you into playing soft, to keep you dancing in circles for their comfort. But you, chosen one, have unplugged every button. You've disabled every emotional shortcut. Think of Elon Musk, who was ridiculed for his audacious visions. He smiled through the criticisms, not because he was weak, but because he was strategically waiting. When he finally unleashed his full vision, the same critics found themselves breathless, scrambling to adjust to his clarity. That's exactly what your new presence does. Now it recalibrates every room, every person, every atmosphere. The old you held space for everyone's wounds, even when it meant bleeding alone. The resurrected you holds no space for dysfunction, no bandwidth for repeated betrayals, no tolerance for half-hearted energies. The one standing here now doesn't whisper warnings. It simply exits silent, focused, final. Matthew 5:37 reminds us, let your yes be yes, and your no, no. Anything more comes from evil. Your new clarity is this scripture in action. No more blurred lines, no more endless chances, no more softening your voice so others don't tremble in the presence of truth. They thought your sweetness was safety. In reality, it was surveillance. They thought you were agreeable. You were actually assessing. They thought they had access. They were simply being observed. Now, as the mask crumbles and the role ends, they face the resurrected you, the unfiltered, unbothered, unreachable force they never imagined they'd have to reckon with. Beloved, chosen ones, as we stand here at the edge of this revelation, remember this deeply. The version of you rising today is not a random product of pain or a fleeting reaction to betrayal. It is the masterpiece the universe always intended, unbreakable, untouchable, unmanageable, and absolutely final. You are not merely stepping into a new chapter, you are stepping into the divine blueprint that was etched into your spirit long before this world even recognized your light. Carry this fire forward with unshakable conviction. Do not dim it for anyone. Do not shrink it to fit spaces too small to hold your magnitude. You are the living, breathing proof that softness can hold a sword, that silence can roar louder than 1,000 screams, and that kindness was never weakness, it was your sharpest strategy. Thank you, truly, for walking this path with me today. Thank you for your courage, your heart, your unwavering presence. Your support means more than words can ever say. If this message has ignited something in your spirit and you feel led, you can support the channel through Super Thanks. Whether you choose to give or not, please know I am profoundly grateful for each and every one of you, simply for being here, for listening, for awakening. I speak blessings over you now. May your light be so radiant that no shadow can survive it. May your clarity destroy every lie built against you. And may your next season overflow with divine favor, peace, and unstoppable breakthroughs. If this resonated with your soul, smash that like button, pound that subscribe so you never miss another divine transmission, and drop 777 in the comments to mark your official awakening. Share this message far and wide so every hidden warrior and silent giant can rise and join this unstoppable collective surge. Together, we are rewriting the battlefield, and trust me, the world won't know what hit it. Stay strong, stay sovereign, and above all, stay chosen.